I'll come right out with my hot take. Weapon damage shouldn't be just an arbitrary number that correlates somewhat with the player's level or the enemy's level, like it is in games like Cyberpunk and Destiny. I'll use some examples to explain what I mean, and what better games to start with than Skyrim and The Witcher 3. I refer to those games specifically because, especially in The Witcher 3, some or all of your main weapons are swords. And speaking of swords, they're all the same, absolutely no variation. And before you rush to the comments or the dislike button, let me elaborate. Of course, swords are different, but when you're using either the exact same motion with each sword, regardless of any design variance in the case of Skyrim, or using swords that are almost indistinguishable apart from minor changes to the hilt or guard that would have no effect on the damage dealt, in the case of The Witcher, they're all effectively the same swords. So what causes this damage variation? Well, in the case of The Witcher, it's not the sharpness of the sword or the material type, it's just a number. As for Skyrim, damage seems to be determined depending on what the material is, and while this makes more sense than the Witcher system, I still don't like it. Why does a material change anything? Sharpness is sharpness. Maybe a blade forged from a stronger material could stay sharp longer than a blade from a softer material, but at the time those two blades were sharpened, shouldn't they do the same damage? It's because of these systems and arbitrary numbers that players are forced to go through a constant cycle of running through the world, throwing away perfectly functional weapons and attire, because if they don't, they'll be unequipped to face their upcoming enemies. Does that seem at all reasonable? Do you see many movies or TV shows where the main character is frantically running through the battlefield, picking up every gun or sword they see? A perfect example of why this system bothers me so much came from when I received the master-crafted sword from Hattori in The Witcher 3. Why do I complain about The Witcher so much? I really do like the game, I promise. I almost instantly discarded it, because the random sword in my inventory did more damage. And how stupid is that? The game wants you to feel like this weapon is a gift made from the best swordsmith in the land, and that it's an honor to wield it, just for me to go either chuck it in my stash or sell it to a random merchant.
Thanks.
Come again. Cheap as it gets right here.
I'm not sure why this type of weapon system seems so popular, but I get the suspicion that it may have something to do with half-assed development. It seems like it's intended to instill within the player a sense of progression, and what better way to feel like you're progressing than seeing a big number go up? I mean, hell, that is the whole basis of D&D. And after all, why make a boss harder to fight by adding difficult moves and stages to memorize and overcome, when instead you can just make an arbitrary health bar bigger? Destiny? Some games, however, have done a much better job at providing weapons in a way that doesn't feel grindy or intrusive, and instead allows you to focus on other game elements that are much more engaging and entertaining. As an example, take Assassin's Creed Black Flag. In this game, you start with 2 cutlasses and can end the game with the same 2 cutlasses, although you can buy different ones if you want. This game handles progression by slowly introducing new weapons and tools for you to use at your discretion. There are damage counters, yes, but it's on a scale of 1 to 3, and you can still insta-kill most enemies with a shot from a level 1 pistol. Okay, so as a brief tangent, I went back to play Black Flag while I was writing this video, and I totally forgot about a combat mechanic in the game that I just have to mention. It is somewhat unrelated to the topic, but it's interesting and it may end up being its own video one day, so this is kind of a test run. The game allows you to pick up weapons of downed enemies and use them. This ties into what I think is one of the best aspects of combat, and one that I think is so often overlooked: the environment. There's too much focus on making the weapons and the moves your character performs look cool that hardly any effort is put into making the environment engaging and useful. And a lot of the time, it seems like being put in a situation where you can use your environment to your advantage is unintended.
He's playing. The strong survive.
Sleeping Dogs is a game that does this perfectly, and essentially forces the player to make use of their environment. Although I'll save any further comments about that game for a future video. Okay, sorry for the tangent, let's get back to the topic. Another game that does this quite well is Mordhau. While being the furthest thing from an RPG, it deals with damage in a way that I absolutely love. All melee weapons are measured on 3 levels: damage, speed, and reach. You also have a maximum carrying capacity that affects your speed the closer you get to your capacity. And what makes this work so well is that it caters to every playstyle you can think of. You want to be a bruiser? You can wear the heaviest armor and swing the longest, heaviest sword. but you're not going to be able to move very fast at all. And if you swing and you miss, you're open to being hit while you recover your stamina. Or say you want to be a fast and nimble archer. You can take the lighter armor and a bow, but you'll have to settle with a smaller sword or knife. Before we go any further, I want to make it really clear what I'm arguing about here. I'm not saying that no weapon should have a number or a damage scale applied to it. I'm saying that the damage a weapon does should have some correlation with how it's used and how it's designed. And the damage dealt should not just be an arbitrary number that continues to go up as you collect new weapons throughout the game. Okay, here's where it's going to get really controversial because I'm going to say what I think is best. I think the game that does it best is honestly Minecraft. Who knows? There could be a game that does it way better, but I'm just speaking from my experience based on the games that I've played. Minecraft's combat system is far from perfect. There are so many games that do a way smoother job with much more satisfying visuals, but that's not what I'm focusing on. What I care about is how the player can interact and make choices about their weapons and tools. If I have an iron sword and I find diamonds, I don't always need to make a sword out of them. Sure, it might do a bit more damage, but if I've spent hours enchanting and repairing the iron sword, it will very likely be just as good, if not better, than the diamond one. This means that as soon as you come across or gain the ability to make a sword that does more damage by default, you don't always need to throw away all the work and upgrades you put into your current weapon. You don't need to take that sword for fear of not being able to fight the next enemy you come across. Yes, you'll eventually craft the diamond sword, but when you do, it may not feel like just another weapon that'll be thrown away at a moment's notice. Instead, it'll be something that stays with you for a while as you enchant it, repair it, and eventually upgrade it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm so glad that I've finally gotten this out. It's been a while since I've uploaded a more opinionated, analytical video, but I really enjoyed doing it, and I hope that you got something out of it. And with that, I hope things are going well in your life, and I really do hope you enjoyed the video.